All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board on the 10th of June, 2024. I'd like to call our meeting to order, acknowledging this meeting is taking place on unceded Algonquin homelands. I would like to acknowledge and thank the Algonquin Nation for their stewardship of these lands since time immemorial. In accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, does any board member have a conflict of interest to declare? Seeing none, I'm going to move for an approval of the agenda. I see Trustee Nash. Does anyone have any changes or additions to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda as presented. And that carries. Moving on to item 5, delegations. There are no public delegations this evening, which brings us to item 6. I'd like to call on Director Buffoni to introduce report 24-080, staff recommended budget.
Through you, Madam Chair, good evening, everyone. I'll turn it over to our Associate Director, Gerwa, and our General Manager, Adam Thwaite, for an update on the staff recommended budget, including the questions and answers provided.
Through you, Chair. I have nothing additional to present at this time as far as the report goes. I'm here to answer any particular questions that you might want to pose to me. I updated the frequently asked question documents with the questions that I did receive. So, floor is open.
All right. Starting at the top of my list, I have Trustee Aziz, then Trustee Blackburn. Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, thank you to staff for putting together a balanced budget this year. It's much appreciated, considering the financial situation and the long process of rejigging the way the formulas are presented to the new provincial model. I'd like to move the staff recommended budget to the floor, please. All right.
I will accept that. Trustee Aziz has moved the staff recommended budget as seen in report 24-080. I'm going to create a speakers list to this item. I'm going to assume the people on my speakers list wanted to speak to it. So I have Trustee Blackburn, then Trustee Presley. Trustee Blackburn. Sorry, my apologies. Trustee Aziz, did you want an introduction?
Thank you, Chair. Just want to again echo my gratitude to staff and to chairs entertaining my moving the item despite being myself being virtual this evening, and encourage my colleagues to vote in favor of the staff recommended budget this evening. Thank you.
All right, Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I'd like to thank my colleague for moving the budget, and I will be happy to support it. I'd like to thank staff for the hard work on this document. It's a very difficult process. We're a very big organization. And I've, as of late, as I usually do, been reading the press clippings that we get every day from throughout the province and throughout the country. And I read that many of the districts around the province are in a position where they're having to make substantial cuts, which are very painful to those districts. And we're not one of those districts doing that. So for that, I thank you. And I look forward to the board passing the budget this evening. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Trustee Presley.
Thank you, Chair Lara. Through you, I also want to pass along my appreciation and thanks to staff. I'm happy to support the budget. I do have a couple questions just for clarification. And apologies, AD Gerwar, I did not get a chance to send you these questions in advance, so hopefully I will be clear and concise for you. If we are to look at the appendix, let me just open this up. Give me one sec here. If we look at Appendix A on line 13, where it says mental health strategy supports emerging needs, I just have a general question to staff of like a general overview of like what types of services supports are provided, and if there's a reason that the proposed budget has been lowered by approximately 10K, like has that been enveloped somewhere else? So that is my first question.
To you, Chair, I'm a little at a loss where you're seeing that number. Is it in the report? Is it in the slide presentation? Is it in the budget binder itself?
So if we're going on through eScribe, my apologies. If we go through eScribe onto the report 24-080, if we go to Appendix A, so I guess it would be the REP, sorry, it'll be the 24-25, the REP grants. My apologies, Randy.
Yeah, now I got it 100%. I know exactly what you're talking about. So I'm just going to pull up that actual grant. Great.
So would it be that the grant has been lowered?
It would just be that the grant's lowered. And actually, I had an interesting discussion with Peter and our ability to use those grants in the first place, because the restrictions are so limited that it has to be for summer schools and things like that, that we have a difficulty in finding staff that are willing to work just for the summer. There's so much demand for mental health professionals. We do find some folks sometimes, but we have struggled to use some of those they're not the old PPFs for sure.
Excellent. No, thank you very much. That is very, very helpful. Okay, so if we're also in Appendix A, the same document, I'm just wondering what this means. So it says REP funding for summer 2024, and it says in brackets, not in the 24-25 budget. I'm just wondering if a staff member could comment, what does the summer mental health support mean? And like what types of supports are provided and to whom?
Through you, Chair, I'd like to pass that over to Superintendent Simmons. I think he'd be best to answer that.
Chair, through you, the summer mental health supports provides continuity of mental health services for students who've been receiving mental health services during the school year. We also use it to provide some small group support in stress lessons and those kinds of things to help students be well positioned for their transition back into school in September. There are a variety of other things that our mental health lead is in the process of trying to coordinate as we speak. So there are definitely some more options that we're looking to engage in this summer with the funding that we have.
Fantastic. I'm really happy to hear that we're still allocating that kind of funding towards these important issues. Okay, third questions. I only have 2 left. Thanks, everyone. So if we go to the recommended budget summary, which is page 4 of 26 on eScribe, I'm looking in the section, the Learning Resources Fund section. It looks as though funding's been moved around a little bit between the different items, but seems to still remain within the same envelope. I'm just looking for a general staff comment on the proposed budget amounts and maybe a brief overview of the rationale for the allocations between what was spent in the actual of 2022 and what we're projecting for the upcoming budget.
Through you, Chair, I'm just going to bring that up and take a look.
Sure. Sorry.
So was that on the eScribe, was that under the report itself or A or B? The 2024 staff recommended budget?
Good question. That is on it's item 6.1, the report itself. And that is on the oops, sorry, my eScribe's being wonky. Yeah, so that would be the 24-25 recommended budget. That little nice little summary that was prepared for us. And that's on page 4. So I guess it's under core education funding. If we go into the Learning Resource Fund, the LRS, I'm specifically just kind of curious about line items 3 to 5, where it goes from Indigenous education supports, though I'm assuming because the Indigenous education funding model has changed, so maybe that's why there's that difference there. But then the mental health and wellness allocation, student safety and well-being, and then the continuing education and other programs allocation. I'm just looking for like a general comment or maybe a little bit of understanding as to why those numbers are where they are.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So we'll begin with the Indigenous education supports. So in 22-23, the program was funded quite differently. Moving into 23-24, the funding changed from classroom allocations to actual usage within the Indigenous community and on Indigenous-based programs. So from a perspective of the Indigenous-based community, their funding actually increased instead of decreased.
Perfect.
The mental health and wellness allocation, although it seemingly goes down, if you look at the next line, the student safety and well-being allocation, it actually goes up substantially. It's
Mhm.
just a realignment of funding. And as far as the continuing education and other programs, it's a youth-based program.
Mhm.
And so we're kind of going back to pre-COVID numbers because the usage and the attendance is going up as it was quite a bit decreased during COVID.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Manager Adam Waite. My last question. Thank you guys for your patience. So we're going to go to the frequently asked questions document. I'll give everybody a second to get there. I'm going to ask around transportation. Do we know how much it would cost to bring purchase and manage drivers through either the board or through OSTA? The FAQ outlines that it's an option, but no dollar amounts associated with it. Is it possible that we could, I mean, not that we have time, but is it possible for there to be an analysis undertaken for next year's budget?
Through you, Chair, if we were to hire them as OCDSB employees or even OSTA employees, it would be significantly more expensive than what we pay now. And then we would also run into the situation of we don't own the assets either. The assets are owned by the third-party vendors. So would we be paying our employees to drive their, so it would be a total model change. So I know some consortiums have hired employees. They've purchased 1 or 2 buses and hired employees, but they don't have the ability, if that employee goes off on sick leave or gets sick, they have to have more redundancy. So it ends up costing the board a lot more money in the long run than using the third-party vendors.
Okay, thank you so much for that. That is all of my questions. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm really happy with the budget. Thank you guys for your hard work. I would encourage all of my fellow colleagues to support it. Thank you. That's all for me.
All right. That takes us to Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I also will support the budget. I just have a few quick questions. My questions, you can look to the Q&A document that you provided. So the first question is around question 30 on that Q&A document. And I'm just wondering about the suite of mental health tools that we're referring to. It looks to me like we're saying that we have lots that's at tier 1, but not really a lot of significant support at tiers 2 and 3. And I'm wondering if the district feels that we are providing sufficient mental health support, or if there is a commitment to increasing the amount of actual mental health support that we're providing to students. So that's my first question, and then I'll go on to my next questions.
Through you, Chair, I think I'd pass it over to Superintendent Sims to answer that.
Chair, thank you for the question. We do work very closely with School Mental Health Ontario and work to really focus on prevention, promotion, and intervention. That is really the lane for school mental health. It is in line, and the province is rolling out Right Time, Right Care to help bring a coordinated model with respect to school-based services and community-based services. So over the next year, we're going to see that implemented and rolled out, along with increased alignment between education and health in the provision of those services. So this year with the grade 7 and 8 modules that came out, and next year with the grade 10 modules on mental health that will come out, we will be a little bit more positioned to be able to do some tier 1 work with a variety of staff members and all students in the grade 10 careers course moving forward. And we do continue to develop partnerships and work with School Mental Health Ontario around the provision of higher tiered levels of support.
Anything
Okay,
further?
thank you. So I I appreciate that, and I just want to make sure that we're not just teaching about what good mental health is, but that we're actually providing supports for students who are struggling. My next question has to do with the question 31, so that'll be also probably directed to you. The learning support services, I know, has shifted from assessments for placement to understanding student needs, but I'm wondering whether we are able to understand student needs if we're not doing assessments, and if we need more supports to be able to do assessments for students.
Chair, through you, the message is that we're not doing assessments. The message is that formal assessments aren't always required in order for us to figure out how to provide the best levels of support for individual student needs. And by reframing how we approach assessments, it means our professional support staff are more able to provide direct classroom support for students and support for educators in meeting the needs of those students. There will always be the need for some assessments, so I don't want to, some formal assessments, I don't want to leave the impression that while we are shifting away from assessment for placement to assessment to understanding learning needs, it doesn't mean that there isn't room for formal assessments as well. So we will continue to do both, but really taking a look at what do we really need to know about the learner? What are the educator observations as a valid data source? And does it always need to go to a formal psychoeducational assessment, for example, that's going to take 20 hours of a professional's time? When we know enough from an OSR review and from doing in-class observations and from the educator observations to give some pretty good advice for moving forward and supporting the student.
Okay, thank you. And my last question for now has to do with question 23 on our Q&A in terms of repairs and ethical obligations for property for upgrades and maintenance of property. So this, my question is, how do we factor into this budget changes in our obligations? And so, for example, it was brought to my attention this week that the lead levels in many of our schools, especially the oldest schools in central Ottawa, are exceeded significantly. And are we factoring in those changes in our obligations to make sure that some items are going to be prioritized that might not have been prioritized in the past?
Through you, Chair, we do present to you the SCI and the FRP, which talks about different areas that we're changing our investment in our capital infrastructure program. But in particular, I'd just like to address the lead levels. A lot of the data in that report was based on standing water during COVID period of time, which is why those sample sizes failed, because there was nobody in the school. So if you don't use the water fountains on a regular basis, the lead counts are higher. But and the other part of the problem is they're using the federal standards, and we use the provincial standards, which is what the city uses because it's city water. So we use the provincial standards. So the difference is 5 parts per million versus 10 parts per million in those things. But we definitely would take any action if we exceeded the provincial standards for lead levels in any of our water fountains. So this is closely monitored by the team, and we absolutely do react to those sort of readings and reports that we receive. We definitely change the way we invest or make recommendations to the board on how we're going to invest the facilities renewal plan or the school condition improvement plan. In particular, I mentioned that we're moving a little bit away from investing all of our HVAC funding in air quality, and now I'm starting to move back to cooling as that's been a growing need in the district. So we absolutely change to the needs and voices of our students and parents and trustees and what the priorities are when we invest our resources in capital investments.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's all my questions for now.
All right. That brings us to Mr. Wong.
Good evening, through you, the chair. I have first of all among two questions, and the first one will be almost like two questions in itself regarding portable structures and the inflationary and labor shortage exceptions. As we prepare for the new school year, this is a question regarding the funding of portable structures while we await the construction of new school buildings, as reported in like the FAQs and discussed before. We have a significant reoccurring annual deficit at this moment. And also based on the feedback I've received from fellow member constituents at the Ottawa-Carleton Assembly of School Councils, it appears that there may be want of better and more portables. Can we explore ways for the ministry to recognize the inflationary and labor shortage exceptions that frequently occur among different school boards in school construction needs related to this item? And then to address this, we could consider establishing an annual or biannually provincially negotiated list of contracted suppliers selected through a competitive bidding process. This list would feature pre-established prices for the year with indexed adjustments for significant fluctuation in resource costs. These suppliers, having met the requirements of all school boards, or most, would provide a common pool of portables for lease or purchase, or options to purchase thereafter, with boards only needing to arrange for delivery. This transparent approach could streamline the process, ensure cost predictability, and better manage the inflationary pressures we face.
Through you, Chair, I will mention that COSBO has lobbied the government to take a look at the funding provided for temporary accommodations. We're one of many school boards that is facing a pressure in this particular area. And they have a set amount, $40 million, that they distribute across all 77 school boards, 77, 76, anyway, school boards. It's based on enrollment growth, and it's a 3-year running average. So they have a formula that they use. And there's a lot of acknowledgement that that costs in this area have increased significantly, but the ministry hasn't adjusted the bucket in that they're applying the formula against. So we'll continue to work through our advocacy channels to try to get them to increase that so that we do have reasonable funding levels to support our portable moves for sure. The other comments that you make about having basically a preferred supplier for portables managed through the province. There is an organization called OECM. They do put out provincially tenders for things like that. Part of the problem with something like portables is you're going to be hard pressed to find one vendor that would support the entire province with portables. And we often find that in different aspects of when we go out for tenders as a group. We're one of the largest users of OECM tenders, actually. So we do save money when they do put offers or arrangements in place for us sometimes. But oftentimes we find that we can get better deals ourselves because there's a lot of regional discounts that you can get with your local vendors, because they actually have to pay a premium to OECM to put those kind of provincially wide contracts in place. Sometimes it's 2, 3, 4%. So oftentimes we can get 2, 3, 4% ourselves just by negotiating directly with the suppliers. We do try to pre-qualify vendors in certain areas, and then there's also the other cost of if you're going with that vendor, but yet the material that you already have on the ground is different, then there's different maintenance costs, and now you might be saving a little bit of money on the capital outlay, but you're increasing your costs on the maintenance side because you're using different equipment, or you have to have 2 sets of equipment. So it's not a real simple way to just save funding. I think it has to be looked at in its complexity, but we do have a pretty robust procurement group that takes a lot of these things into consideration and has been able to find all kinds of different ways for us to create efficiencies.
Thank you. That answers actually my second question also. Yeah.
All right. There's nothing further, Mr. Wong. That takes us to Trustee Milburn.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. a couple of my colleagues. I thank them for asking the questions that I did already have. I'm going to focus on two-ish main areas. So the first one is we're looking at the financial summary. So that's Appendix B, I believe. Don't quote me, but the financial summary on page 3, I am looking at the central administration revenue fund, and I'm seeing that there has been an increase, and I'm consistently hearing from my community that the district is top heavy. So I'm wondering if you can expand and provide some insight on how the school community will be served with the increase of the central administration fund further than the 3 positions that you brought up last week.
Through you, Chair, there's a couple of things that I'd like to make note of in that. One of it is some reallocation of funds that were or expenses that were in different areas. In particular, we moved some custodians from the facilities line to the admin line because they were supporting 133 Greenbank. So that was part of the exercise I've been talking about at a couple of the committee of the wholes in committee of the whole budgets, where we're trying to realign expenses to where they belong. So that did generate a bit of that was about 6 FTE, a little bit more, which was fairly significant. The other thing is that the predominantly was not increase in staff, but increase in labor costs due to pay raises associated with collective agreement or Bill 124, the $1 an hour, those sort of things. And we have a lot of those staff in there. So there was some slight staff increases in that number. Those are the ones that you see in the investments, the disability coordinator and the payroll clerks. And there was also a term legal analyst for 16 months that was associated with backfilling position that was vacant so that we could continue to address our investigations associated with staff working from home. So by not filling that position, we would have had that number build up to an untenable level, and it would have cost the board a lot more than backfilling that position to ensure that we did the investigations in a more timely manner.
All right, thank you for the further explanation. It's always good to provide some insight into some of these line items for the public that may be watching. Building on that question though, so you did talk about it just now, and you talked about it last week, the 2 payroll supports that have been helping with all of the payroll and making sure that we're meeting our obligations. Have these positions been made permanent through this increase? I'm seeing nodding ahead, so I'm hoping that's yes.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, that's if you pass this budget with the way it is, those positions will be made permanent. That's what we're attempting to do. They were not. So when it's an FTE, sorry, when it's a term under 12 months, it's often not an FTE count, but just a dollar pressure. Here, you're seeing a FTE count and a dollar pressure because we're attempting to make those 2 positions permanent. And so that's what, so it's not a growth in staff, it's just a formalization of staff that's already on the ground. We have a fairly significant turnover in payroll staff, and trying to staff term positions doesn't suit the organization. It costs us more in the long run. So if we can make those 2 positions permanent and keep those staff, it will go a long way in helping stabilize our payroll operations.
All right, I am very glad to hear that, and that there's going to be some permanency brought to those positions. So I'm going to change gears now. So I'm going to go on to page 11 of the financial summary. I see that we spend almost $95,000 on retirement gratuities, and I'm wondering if you can explain what this fund is being used for, and specifically what staff are being served through this fund. Is it all staff? Is it a few staff? If we could just have some insight, that would be appreciated.
Through you, Chair. It's actually a line item that's a requirement through the restructuring of sick days. About 10 years ago, the gratuity program was eliminated, and we are required, for anybody who had 10 years or more of service, we are required to put those days aside and pay it out upon retirement. That is just the inflationary increase against that line item.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. That provides much needed insight. I have 2 more quick questions. So we're going to flip to the FAQs. And I was seeing in the FAQs, we talked about the SATE program and it being a standalone program, and there's no plan to, sorry, apologies. I see that the SATE program, there is no plan to implement it as a standalone program. Is this due to budgetary constraints, or is it just because we don't have it's not a program that would be a standalone program.
I'm going to turn that one to the director.
Through you, Madam Chair, thanks to Vice Chair Mulburn for the question. The SATE initiative is actually not a program per se, but rather an inquiry with respect to effective practices that support students and their families, and the wraparound supports provided through the associated FACE initiative. The purpose of that endeavor as an inquiry is to explore effective practices that the research is indicating helps students, especially those who are facing barriers of one form or another. The goal of the inquiry is to allow the progression of that over the course of a few years' time. We haven't put a closing date onto that, and continuing the learning from that, but then to extrapolate or to expand the learning that's value add for the organization through to all the work taking place in program services and learning support services. So it's a continuation of the inquiry as it stands, expansion slightly into some additional schools that are will benefit from the nature of the inquiry, and then looking to apply that across our organization where there's value.
Any comment, Mr. Charrois? No?
Through you, Chair, no, I have nothing to add.
Okay. Anything further, Trustee Milburn?
Yes, thank you for the explanation on the SAFE program. The last question I have is, as a follow-up from last year, and I don't have any appendix to reference, we had passed a motion about a green bin program, and I'm wondering if the funding is still in this budget.
Through you, Chair, the funding for the green bin program is still in this budget, and we are actively trialing 6 different sites right now. And the intention is to continue on with the learning associated with the pilot program next year as well. I will say that we did a costing of about $2 million to roll this out across the entire district. We did not include that into the budget at this time for 2 reasons. One, we haven't done enough pilot testing in the school sites to get enough data to figure out how to properly roll this out. And 2, and more importantly, the city's changed their policy with regard to picking up green bins at schools. They're actually, now we are using a third-party vendor to pick up our green bins. And the city was surprised when my team was liaising with the city, because they thought they had all the capacity from this third-party provider. They were surprised they were actually providing us support, but there's no capacity in the city right now to do across the district green bin pickup at school sites. So I think that's something that's going to require a bit more piloting, and then maybe a longer-term strategy at a different time.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you for all of the hard work to provide us with a balanced budget. I know during these times it's really difficult, so we greatly appreciate it. That's all my questions for now.
All right. That takes us to Trustee Bell.
Good evening, everyone. Going to start off expressing my gratitude for the Q&A document and also for the environmental sustainability memo that was shared with us a little while back. Some of my questions have to do, or thoughts have to do with what was stated in the Q&A document, starting off with the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap. I had asked if it was costed out, all of the line items and action items, and the short answer in the document is that it's not. I find that that's a very great missed opportunity, and I hope as the roadmap goes forward, we'll be able to start to see how much certain initiatives cost, so that if in fact we can prove that there are demonstrated results, that we can increase our investments into that, because that's where I think in this budget we want to be really aligned with our strategic plan. A great example of that that's already been mentioned tonight is SATE. As Donna Dixon has mentioned in the last meeting, this is a inquiry program that is demonstrating strong results. And I hope that if we are in fact looking to expand that, we know how much it costs and we can adequately resource that. I think as well, with regard to the question on the advocacy committees and how they can best support us in the budget process, I do believe that there is a role for them. Policy and dollars go hand in hand. And so what we can do, actually, this is a question for the director, what we can do to better support our advocacy committees, such as ACE, IAC, SEAC, and others, to understand the dollar value associated with programming and to hear from them on what works and what doesn't in head of budget process I'd be very grateful to hear from the director on that. And then lastly, expressing my gratitude once again, sounding like a broken record, for the advocacy documents. We do not have adequate funds to address special education. The province has not given us sufficient funds to address mental health and well-being, capital projects. We don't have the funding to adequately look at cyber threats, replacement worker costs, transportation. Check out our advocacy documents. And I very much encourage my fellow trustees and all of the advocacy committees to share those documents, because if we had those adequate resources given to us, we would be in such a better place to achieve the results that we've set out in our strategic plan. So thank you very much to the team for making those documents. That's it. Just the one question for the director. Thank you.
Director.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Trustee Bell, for the question. I think it's an interesting point. One of the things that we're going to do as we come to a close of this school year and reset for the upcoming school years, reach out to, of course, our committee structures, ACE, IAC, others, SEAC, PIC, as you mentioned, all of our committees to determine a number of aspects of what our goals ahead. And so we'll bring into those meetings with our committee structures their aspirations for the upcoming school year, their perspectives on what's working, strengths to celebrate, what's not working, or might be areas for growth and reflection that speak specifically to either the student groups or the perspective, the communities of those committees and what's served through those committees. So we'll bring that forward to our meetings going into the upcoming school year in order to elicit feedback, input, suggestions, comments for the next budgetary cycle next school year.
All right. Seeing no other speakers up, Trustee Scott.
Thank you, and I will echo the appreciation of those around the table and on screen for the budget document itself. It's clean, it's tidy, and it is really good to see the detailed level of the answers in the Q&A document. That's been very helpful. Looking at our budget this year, yes, funding is tight, no question about that. There are some things we can do without necessarily adding resources, but simply by changing what we do with the resources that we have. And where there is a better way to do something, I think most people are fairly willing to accept that. When it's a matter of adding on to existing work, that is much more challenging. And I think that's another area where we need to do some advocacy with the province in terms of adding new requirements for us, but not providing us with the funding to hire the people to comply with those requirements. I think that it is very worthwhile to continue disseminating the advocacy documents. So far, I've had meetings with a couple of MPPs, and also a conversation with one, which will turn into a longer meeting over the summer. And there are a couple more potential MPP meetings that are also in the works. So I think they have been, generally speaking, fairly well received. And certainly, I think they are helping to clarify for people who are not as familiar with the complexities of school board funding as we and our staff certainly are, why it is that we are asking for more funds for some very specific things. So in that, until we're successful, we are still going to be running a very tight ship when it comes to how we use the funds we have. But I am confident that staff have built a budget here that is going to be a very functional one, and that is not so generous as to put us at risk, but not so stingy as to put us in a position of having great difficulty doing the things that we most need to do. So thank you very much for that.
All right. I didn't hear a question. Does staff have a comment?
Through you, staff, I just want to thank Lynn for her comments. I think you hit the nail on the head there. We tried to put a fair and balanced budget in front of you that would meet the needs of the district, given the resources that we have, and I appreciate you seeing that.
Okay. I have Mr. Wong as a second-time speaker. Mr. Wong.
Through you, the chair, there's the mention of the supporting role of the special groups committees for advocacy there, and for representing like the SAAC there, but in particular also the from OCASC, from as the individual speaking from a point of view of parents. I believe that having spoken to many parents voicing the needs of children, the children, the community with special needs, and of other that they've spoken to that have special needs, is that the being able to understand clearly what the issues are in terms of the inclusivity, the special needs programs, the making it work and getting the funding, because the funding, as we've seen over the course of the year and recently putting together this budget of all the hard work and balancing it, there still is a big funding gap that needs to be addressed by the ministry, and how to help the parents better understand all that and help them advocate on behalf of the school board and across the province, I believe, for the parents to make this happen. And so I think if more resources could be made available to the parents to help them advocate better on behalf of everyone.
I didn't hear a question, but Director, Executive Officer, or
through you, Chair, I just like to, I appreciate those comments about advocacy, and I would like to encourage parents to advocate across the system, whether it be to the ministry directly or to the MPPs. Please continue to use your voice. I found that that community has a loud voice and has a compelling story to tell. And I encourage you to use that voice and tell that story in the places that could make a difference in receiving more funds for the school board to invest in that area. And so, you know, reach out. I know, hopefully, I heard there's a potential election on the horizon, and this is a good time to use that voice in being heard.
Mr. Wong, the floor is still yours.
Perhaps my question would be to be asking what could be done to ask to have the parents get more involved actively, to help them understand and participate better in advocating, because I believe many would very much want to help out in advocating personally for supporting getting more funding and communicating what the issues are in terms of special needs, being able to articulate the issues in a cohesive way together.
Through you, Chair, we provided the advocacy document. I think that's a powerful document to use for parents, but just tell your story. Email your story. There's a lot of really compelling stories that those parents have, and nobody can tell it better than them. Email your MPPs, show up at the, when the province does the annual call for budget, show up at that meeting and try to get some voice or representation there. And your MPPs are a powerful source. So, you know, we had one bring your MPP to school day, and one of them, I can't remember which of the two sites they visited, but I think it was Clifford Bowie, and that was an impactful experience for that Bay. So that was an impactful experience for that MPP. The more that we can encourage them to get out and see what's happening on the ground with those students and the supports that they need and the great work that's going on within this district, the better it is. So I encourage you to keep trying to close that gap and share your experiences. I think that's the most powerful way to get your voice heard.
Anything further, Mr. Wong?
No, thank you. That helps very much provide clarity.
Okay. I have a first-time speaker, Ms. Rob.
Thank you, Chair. I was concerned at the beginning of the debate on this motion with some of the statements about happy to support the budget and answers to questions about sufficient funding, sufficient allocations in a variety of line items. And I recognize that everybody around this table who is putting in their time tonight and on countless other nights to support publicly funded education in Ontario really gets it. But I wanted to take the time to be very clear that while there's been amazing work done into putting this budget together and us having our meetings, this isn't a good situation. There were huge cuts in recent years to the OCDSB budget. And the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives has estimated $15,000 per student is lacking in this budget compared to 2018-2019. And we weren't overspending then. We could certainly debate what our priorities were and what the best use of money was. But this is a good budget only in the sense that it meets the constraints that have been unfairly imposed upon this school board by this provincial government. We have a staff right now, unionized and not, in all sectors of this system that have been stretched in terms of what we're asking for them. And even in the places where we've maintained staffing levels, we're not able to replace when people are absent and people don't have the tools to do the work that they really want to do. We've got a system where wellness is going to need to be our top priority next year so that staff can support students and that we can survive the cuts that are being decided upon on tonight, or that are remnants of decisions that were made in previous years. And again, I recognize that people around this table and on the Zoom call are here because we care about publicly funded education. But let's not forget that this isn't where we wanted to be tonight.
I didn't hear a question. Do we have a comment from staff?
Through you, Chair, I just would echo your comment. I think I started the budget meeting in the landscape and I talked about the fact that the demand is greater than the supply as far as funding goes. And it would be nice to see the province, invest more in education. And I think with an upcoming election, now is the time for us to advocate strongly to close the gaps in areas so that we can maybe get some of that money that we've lost or spending power that we've lost over the past decade back in investing in students. So I hear and appreciate your comment, and I feel the same way, trying to put this budget together.
All right. Second time speaker, Trustee Kaplan-Murphy.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So I want to just, I guess, echo some comments that others have made, Trustee Bell and Trustee Aziz and the speaker just now has aptly pointed out that while we may support this budget. We're not okay with the underfunding of education. We're not okay with the lack of, well, it is not lack of, but the insufficient, the dearth of supports for mental health, for special education, and so on. And so where we're saying that we will support this budget, we are for sure saying that we are unhappy with the situation that our students and our communities and also our educators are finding themselves in. But that's not the fault of our district. I wanted to ask, and I asked this last week, and we've talked about it, and it's in the Q&A, but I wanted to ask about our being under supervision from a perspective of where are we going to be next year or the following year. What kind of budget would we need to, what would need to change for us to be able to put the supports in place that we've advocated for? And I think Trustee Aziz had asked about, I'm not sure what happened with that conversation, but we had asked about having a budget that would kind of reflect if we really could do all the things that we wanted to do for our students, what would that look like? But I'm even just wondering, in terms of getting out of being under supervision by the Ministry of Education, what would it take? What would we need to change? And that's part of our elementary program review, but what do you think would need to be significantly different so that we would have the resources that we need to get out of being under supervision?
Through you, Chair, I think that's a tough question to answer because there's a couple of components to it, but the reality is, to be just from a technical perspective, we would require 2 to 3 budget surpluses to get out of the supervision standpoint. But what I think I hear you talking about is, like, from a fundamental program change, what would we need to do to get out of under supervision? And I think potentially some enrollment growth could have a positive impact on our situation. I think being more efficient with the use of our resources. When I think about what's important to this Board of Trustees versus our financial situation, I think I can't see where we would be passing surplus budgets because there is so much need in the system. But that's really what it would mean not investing resources in our students. And I'm not sure we're at that spot right now. So I have a hard time telling you what the future will look like with regard to this financial supervision piece, but it might be changing bus distances. It might be closing some schools. There's a variety of things we could do to be more efficient within the resources that we have allocated to us. But I think, what I hear from this board on a regular basis and from the staff in this organization right now, what we really want to do is do the best we can with the resources we have to meet the needs of our students and give them the best chance moving forward. So I think that's about as far as I could say on that.
Okay, thank you.
Director?
Through you, Madam Chair, I appreciate our Associate Director's comments. I couple of points to add. I think beyond the concerns raised through the advocacy briefs, which are all legitimate areas for us to continue to advocate with the provincial government and their ministry officials on needs, we've got some clear emphasis on efficiencies and effectiveness within the organization that are within our control, and some that are not within our control, such as school closures. There's a moratorium on school closures, as is outlined in our pupil accommodation review guideline and other associated legislation for us. So it's a combination for us when it comes to the budget to look for ways internally to address areas where we can be more effective and efficient, and also to continue to advocate for those areas, as a number of our trustees have pointed out are pressure points for us. In addition to, and I don't want to lose sight of this, the simple fact of cost of doing business continues to rise. Inflationary pressures are a factor. So even with all other items as budget lines being equal, there are additional considerations that have been pointed out that add to the pressures of our budget.
Anything further, Trustee Kaplan-Murray?
The only other question, and this was raised, I think, last week as well, is the walking school bus. Was that added back into the budget?
Through you, Chair, it wasn't, but I did reach out to OSTA to talk about that particular activity. As it stands right now, they're not, it's not in their budget. And so if the trustees who are members of OSTA want to bring that up in a future OSTA board meeting for discussion, it could be discussed. But as of right now, it's not in the budget for OSTA. They are really working on a couple of priorities as far as stabilizing transportation. And so I don't see that as an initiative that they're interested in focusing on right now, but I'm only one member on that board.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
All right. I have second time speaker, Trustee Scott.
Thank you. I just wanted to do follow up in terms of Mr. Wong's question about advocacy across the province to say that I did share our advocacy documents with members of the Eastern Region school boards who belong to the Provincial Public School Boards Association, and the OPSPA staff who were at that meeting not only took them back enthusiastically to Toronto, but I gather have also since distributed them to all of the member boards so that other boards could use those as a model for developing their own versions with their own numbers in them. And I believe they have been quite enthusiastically received. So it's not going to be only us, I think. I think it will be a lot of boards following this same advocacy path because we all have similar problems.
All right. Seeing no further questions or comments, would Trustee Nash please take the chair for a moment?
Certainly, please go ahead.
Thanks. Oh, sorry, I see it.
Through you, Chair, I'd just like to make one comment. I think it was Darcy that did the fine work from communications to get those advocacy papers distributed, and I just wanted to make sure that he was acknowledged for that because I think that was over and above. So I just wanted to put that shout out to him.
Trustee Lara, please ask your questions.
Thanks. So the only question that I have is, do you know what percentage we have lost in funding in both the teacher and the non-teacher salaries since last year and since 3 years ago or before the pandemic? What percentage is our funding down? What's the total value that we're down?
Through you, Chair. I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Are you asking per pupil funding? Has that decreased?
If you could give it to me per pupil, I would accept that. I would also be willing to accept just an overall loss because some of the things are rather difficult to pin to a specific per pupil allocation. Like I know that our capital funding is down against inflation. I'm wondering if we know how much. I know that our like some of our, we don't call them PPFs anymore, our FMs, our EMs, our PMs are down against inflation. I'm wondering if we have an aggregate inflation number that we know that we are down against last year's funding or the year before's funding.
So I can't give you a number at this point in time. I do acknowledge that it's obvious through our funding system that inflation pressures outpace our funding, and we are struggling year over year to provide the same services in the classroom. But I can't put a number to that right now.
Do you have further follow-up?
Yeah, so based on what you have said, because our funding is down this year versus last year, we are not going to be able to provide the same quality of education or the same effective education because we do not have the same resources in the system as we did last year?
Through you, Chair. So technically speaking, if you wanted to look at dollar for dollar, you would see that funding has actually increased over last year, but it hasn't increased to the level of the inflationary pressures or the pressure of the staff increases and Bill 124 and all those other increases that we are obligated to pay through negotiated requirements and legal requirements. So it's a difficult question to answer because if we're going to say technically we have received more money, just it doesn't meet the needs for the pressures that have been provided or put on us through the issues that I've just mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Those are all of my questions.
I give you back the chair.
All right. Seeing no further questions, I'm going to poll the room on whether or not we feel comfortable voting on the budget tonight or whether or not we want to postpone the decision to another meeting.
Point of order, Chair, may I have my closing remarks?
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Say again.
May I have my closing remarks?
No, because if the meeting is unwilling to vote on this today, we're going to postpone the meeting for a future time. And so if you have closing remarks, then we vote on it. If people have questions they haven't had answers to, or they feel they want to continue this meeting at a later time, I'm going to poll the room and see if we want to vote on this tonight or if we want to postpone it for a later time. So you can't have closing because we might not be closing it. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So in an informal poll, are we comfortable voting on this tonight? Please raise your hands. Okay, and that is more than 2/3 of trustees have raised their hands. So yes, Trustee Aziz, you may have closing.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for keeping a temperature check in the room. I appreciate the hard work of staff and pulling together this balanced budget during a time of shortened funding and increased inflationary pressures. I'm happy to move this budget and bring it forth on behalf of the hard work of staff because I'm relieved that we were able to get a balanced budget and relieved that we aren't having to make these sort of significant cuts we had to last year. I want to echo the concerns we've heard from parents, our staff members, from our community members, from Federation partners, from leading policy advocates that we're seeing a year-over-year decrease in long-term investments from the province in our education system. We need this government to take public education seriously. We need to see that they care about our children's mental health. We need to see that they care about long-term investments in our teachers, in our special education funding, investments in our diverse students and their learning needs. We need this province to walk the talk by providing better funding, sustainable funding for our schools, not just schools at the OCDSB, but schools across the province, schools that are serving rural communities, schools that are serving smaller populations, schools that are serving diverse religious, ethnic, and other populations. The school boards and others across the province simply cannot sustainably formulate budgets that are underfunded, that are squeezed, and that we're having to constantly have conversations about quote unquote shaving the ice. It is not up to staff to continue to suffer under budget lines that are red year over year. It's not fair to them, it's not fair to our students, it's not fair to our communities. I am relieved to pass this budget this evening, and I'm relieved all the hard work staff can hopefully take some time off this summer to enjoy the hard work they've put into this. And I'm grateful for their hard work. I'd like to implore our colleagues in the provincial legislature to walk the talk and provide significant, substantial, and sustainable funding for our public education system going forward. We cannot continue to deliver the high quality, world-class education we provide in Ontario to our communities without the financial means to do it. With that said, I am relieved to bring these recommendations to the table and am greatly appreciative of the support of my colleagues around the table this evening. Thank you, Chair.
All right, and with that, I'm going to put it to a vote. Can everybody see the recommendation on the screen, or do we need it read? Hearing no request for it to be read, I'm going to ask, we're not voting on this on eScribe, it's just a cap. So all those in favor, please raise your hands. And those opposed? And that carries.
Sorry, I just wanted to be clear. Sorry, my hand was very slow to go up and down, but I was in favor, not opposed.
Okay, noted. That carries. That takes us to item 6.1, the questions and answers document, which we have heard about. There's nothing to discuss there. That takes us to the advocacy briefing notes, which we've also discussed. Nothing further to discuss there. That brings us to item 7, new business information and inquiries. Are there any new business for the budget? Seeing none, that takes us to adjournment. This meeting is adjourned. I will see you all shortly for the special board meeting.
Are we staying on the same link?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Michael.
Great summary, Alicia.
Thanks, Justine, and thank you to folks on the line for bearing with us.
Does this mean that we don't have a meeting on Wednesday?
No, we don't. It was like a placeholder in case it didn't pass this evening.
That's what I thought.
We may be on speaker in the room, so FYI, everyone.
Good point.
Yeah.
So seeing that we have quorum, I would like to call this special meeting of the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board to order and acknowledge that we are meeting this evening on the unceded and unsurrendered ancestral homelands of the Algonquin Nation. I would like to thank the Algonquin people for their enduring stewardship of this land and for the wisdom that they have shared with us, which I hope will help us in our deliberations. In accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, does any board member have an interest to declare? And I'm seeing none, so we will move on to approval of the agenda. Is there a mover for approval of the agenda? Trustee Lyra, thank you. And a seconder? Trustee Nash? Any discussion on the agenda? In that case, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? And that motion is carried. We have one matter for action this evening, and I will call on Trustee Lyra, Chair of Committee of the Whole Budget, to present the oral report with the proposed motion for approval of the 2024-2025 staff recommended budget. Trustee Lyra.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. The board met this evening in public and recommends, the Committee of the Whole Budget read this evening and recommends as follows. A, that the unconsolidated 2024-2025 operating budget of $1,169,323,005 as presented in report 24-080, 2024-2025 staff recommended budget and detailed in the 2024-2025 staff recommended budget binder be approved. And B, that the 2024-2025 capital budget of $838,114 as presented in the 2024-2025 staff recommended budget binder be approved. Moved by Trustee Aziz, seconded by me.
Thank you very much. We did have extensive debate on this just in our earlier Committee of the Whole Budget meeting this evening. So I will ask if we can go ahead or if there is a wish to debate. Trustee Lyra.
I have something to say, so I'd like it to be put as a debate item.
In that case, we will go ahead to debate, and I will call on Trustee Aziz as the mover to introduce.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Trustee Lyra for reading the recommendations. I won't repeat myself as we were able to debate this item earlier, but again, we'll echo the concerns raised by the community regarding ongoing squeezed budgets that have been reality for the school boards across Ontario, and again, express my gratitude to our staff for putting together a balanced budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Aziz. Now speakers to the motion, Trustee Lyra.
Thanks. As you are all aware, the OCDSB is required under provincial law to pass a balanced budget unless we have surpluses to cover the extra costs. The budget before us this evening is a balanced budget in that it does not violate the law, but it is not a budget that I believe will support the needs of all of our students to the level they deserve to be supported. Public education is one of the greatest goods of a democratic society. It is intended to allow anybody, no matter where they come from, no matter their background, to be able to succeed. And when we underfund public education, we undermine that promise. This budget is yet another step in the underfunding of public education. Because we are required by law to pass a balanced budget, I am certain this is going to pass. And I will be supporting it because the responsibility of trustees includes to pass a balanced budget. That does not mean that I am happy about it. That does not mean that I think this is in the best interest of our students. This is being passed because it is required by law. And I am disappointed. I am disappointed that we as a society have not chosen to prioritize public education. I am disappointed that we as a society have not decided to ensure that the next generation of students is able to succeed to the level that we were. And for those reasons, I'm going to I'm going to be unhappy. I'm going to express that unhappiness in every way that I know how, and I'm going to continue to advocate for improved resources in public education. But this budget is going to pass because we are required by law to pass a balanced budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lyra. Are there any other speakers to the motion? Trustee Kaplan-Myrth.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I want to echo the sentiment expressed by Trustee Aziz and by Trustee Lyra. While we do have a duty to approve this budget, we're not happy about it. It's an inadequate budget for our students with special needs. It's an inadequate budget for really for all of our students, all of our learners. Our educators have made it clear that they don't have adequate supports. We still have classrooms that are overcrowded and under-resourced, and we are letting down more generations of children by allowing our province to underfund us. But that being said, what we can do is ask the community and our MPPs and others to continue to lobby for more funding for public education, and we can continue to express our concerns about the ways in which we are letting down our communities, our students, and also our educators. So I will support this, but it is inadequate, not because of our district, but because of the circumstances in which we're working. Thank you.
And are there any other speakers to the budget motion? Seeing that, before I go back to Trustee Aziz, I will ask Trustee Nash if she could please take the chair for a moment.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. There's no question that I think most of us believe that the funding that we receive for public education is not adequate. However, I think that is not to say that we cannot do a very good job of educating students. We have superb staff. We have done a lot of work and learning to find better ways to do a great many things. And I really believe that money is not always the solution. Sometimes it's a matter of doing something a little bit differently that will make a tremendous difference for our students. It would be nice to have more funding, but I know that our staff are going to make the absolute best use they can of the funding we receive, and that our students will continue to excel as they have for years in the past. And we will also continue to advocate very strongly for the additional resources that we would like to see, because we know that there are still more things we can do, and we know that there are the level of complex needs among our students continues to increase. With that, I would like to express appreciation to all of the staff teams who have worked very hard to put this budget together, and to my colleagues on the board for some very good debates and discussions. Thank you.
I give you back the chair.
Thank you. So back to you, Trustee Aziz, for wrap up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleagues around the table for their remarks this evening, echoing sentiments around the serious need for serious public education funding. I will, however, not let that dampen our spirits as we enter a wonderful time of year, and want to wish a very happy Pride Month to all of our 2S LGBTQ+ students, staff, and members of the community to end this evening's special board meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Aziz. The motion is on the screen. It has been read out. and has not been amended. So I will ask Manager Guthrie to open the vote. And for those who are using eScribe, it will be in the special board meeting eScribe agenda, not in the budget committee one. Thank you. And the motion is carried unanimously with all 12 trustees voting in favor. With that, our business is completed for this evening, and I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.